Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring Jesus' deeply positive attitude toward his preaching work and, how exactly it fueled his lasting enthusiasm. Because when we look at historical figures who managed to sustain a massive level of energy and dedication over long periods, well, the secret almost always lies in their mindset. So we're going to use the source material today to really unpack how Jesus maintained his zeal and what specific mental frameworks allowed him to view his ministry with such absolute, unwavering optimism.
Moving into our first section, joy in the ministry.
To really get a grasp on how he sustained all that energy, we've got to look closely at his internal motivation, right? It's one thing to do a job just out of pure obligation, but it is an entirely different experience when the work itself is a source of deep personal fulfillment. Jesus wasn't just, clocking in and performing a routine duty. He experienced profound, genuine joy in what he did. As Luke 10:21 highlights right here, he became overjoyed in the Holy Spirit. Our source material points out that Jesus actively maintained a positive attitude about his preaching work. It was literally this exact joy and positive outlook that acted as his fuel. It helped him stay consistently enthusiastic about his ministry, completely regardless of the challenges he was facing. Which brings us to our next section, the Great Harvest.
Now, this joy leads us perfectly into a really powerful agrarian metaphor he used to describe his work, and that's the harvest. Think about it. When you want to convey a huge sense of abundance and readiness to people, you use imagery they can instantly connect with. For a society that was so closely tied to agriculture, the concept of a harvest was absolutely the perfect way to visualize his positive attitude. And as we can see on this timeline, this harvest mindset wasn't just some passing thought. No, it was a core, consistent worldview across his entire ministry. Back in late 30 CE, Jesus saw that a lot of people were ready to respond to his preaching. Instead of just seeing a random crowd, he actually likened them to a ripe field ready to be harvested, which we see in John 4:35. Then about a year later, he explicitly tells his disciples, "The harvest is great," citing Matthew 9:37 and 38. And even later on, he emphasized this exact same thought yet again, saying in Luke 10:2, "The harvest is great. Beg the master of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest."
So, the really crucial point here is his repetition of this phrase. It proves he never ever lost sight of the vast potential for people to respond to the good news. By keeping this simple but honestly profound phrase, "The harvest is great," right at the forefront of his mind, he was actively training himself to focus on the sheer abundance of the opportunity. He rejoiced whenever people actually did respond. Basically, he was looking at the massive potential yield, not the exhausting difficulty of the labor itself. And maintaining that perspective, well, that is exactly what safeguarded his zeal.
Let's move into our final section, maintaining your zeal. Moving away from his own personal mindset for a second, we've got to look at how this historical context directly applies to his followers. Having personal zeal is amazing, but true leadership requires actually transferring that energy to others. We have to ask ourselves, how did Jesus practically transfer this incredibly optimistic mindset to his disciples so they wouldn't just burn out? Because let's face it, the preaching work was undoubtedly demanding. So, what was the specific teaching strategy he used to make sure his followers could maintain their own joy and energy over the long haul?
Well, Jesus purposefully taught his disciples to adopt his exact same framework. First up, they were told to never lose sight of the potential for people to respond to the good news. They had to consciously train themselves to see that ripe field just like he did, always focusing on the possibility of growth. Secondly, they needed to actively rejoice when people did respond. Actually taking the time to pause and truly celebrate those victories is huge. And third, they had to deliberately keep a positive view of their message. By actively recognizing all that potential and holding on to a positive view of their work, the disciples could maintain their own fire and enthusiasm. Honestly, it was a perfectly designed formula for maintaining zeal.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really ask yourself how you can apply this positive harvest mindset to your own daily routine. Think about how keeping a highly positive view of your own message and work could completely transform your enthusiasm, starting today. When you look at the challenges right in front of you, are you just seeing exhausting labor, or are you actually seeing the incredible potential of a ripe harvest? What field in your own life is a great harvest waiting for workers? Be sure to check out the screen for where to find more information, and thank you so much for joining us.